everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about step 2. I'm going to be talking about the resources I used, how I studied for it, and also how to prepare for test day itself. So let's get started. And if you see me looking down, it's just because I have a bunch of points written down that I want to cover for all of you today. So the first one is resources. My main resource for step 2 was UWorld. The number one thing that I'm going to tell you today is that doing as many questions as you can is going to be the most helpful for you. So for me, UWorld was my highest priority resource, but if you want to use Amboss or some other question bank, that's totally fine as long as you're doing questions consistently and building up your stamina for test day. Not only is this going to help your brain get to full capacity when it comes to taking that 9-hour test, which yes, is very brutal, but it's also going to help you retain the information and help you learn the material and review as you're going through them every single day. The second resource I want to talk about are the NVMEs. It sucks that we have to pay for them, and it's definitely not cheap, like purchasing those 3 practice exams, but it's very important for me, and I think it would be helpful for you as well because they have new information, new material, and these are extra practice questions that you can learn from. There's been times where I did these NVMEs and I had 2 or 3 questions on my shelf exams and for step 2 that were so similar, and the NVMEs were the only place I had seen them before. So why would you not want those free points? So it's definitely something to check out. Moving on to resources that I kind of used here and there but was not consistent with were Anki, Divine Interventions, and Emma Holiday. Anki is definitely great if you're someone who likes to use flashcards. It's very easy to use if you use a deck that's pre-made like me. I happen to use the Anki one here and there, and it was definitely useful because it helps you retain information and you have that constant spaced repetition, which is great if you're on the go or at the hospital doing rotations and you can just quickly open it up and keep going. But for me personally, I found it to be dreadful because every day, if I skipped a day or 2, I would open it up and all of a sudden my reviews are 800 or 1,000 cards, and it was just extremely dreadful for me to have to go through these flashcards. And I found it tedious that I got to a point where I was only clicking through and not actually learning the material. So what I want to say about Anki is if you are a flashcard person, definitely use it, and it's also helpful if you use it in combination with UWorld. But if you're only going to be clicking through and thinking that you're studying but you're not actually retaining the information, don't waste your time doing these cards. For Divine Interventions, this is a podcast, so it's great for people who like audio when it comes to learning, and I know a lot of people do. They like hearing things out and being able to piece it together, and the number one podcast from him that I found the most helpful was the Biostats and Epidemiology. So if you're like me and you struggle with that, I would definitely check it out. He even has a PowerPoint that goes along with it, and you can answer those questions as he's speaking. I personally chose to only watch, or I guess listen to, the topics that I needed extra help with, but if you're someone who prefers being able to listen to every single topic, I would definitely start listening to him way ahead of time because there's a lot of videos and podcasts to go through. Emma Holiday is the last one I want to talk about. She was a med student in Texas, and I believe she's an oncologist now, still in Texas. She made these videos as a 4th year to help out students who were going to be preparing for their shelf exams and for step 2, and she did a great job in making PowerPoints that were quick and to the point, and she goes through each one. She has images that go with them and everything, so I would definitely check it out. It's free on YouTube if you like having visuals and audio together, and it's a great way to review as well. So those are the resources that I wanted to talk about. The next thing I want to discuss is how I studied. So for me, I started using UWorld when I was in 3rd year. I used UWorld for shelf exams, and I was continuously doing at least 1 or 2 blocks a day for a year straight before the idea of studying for step 2 even popped into my head. But technically, I had already been studying for step 2 because I was reviewing that material for an entire year, and I had went through the entire UWorld question bank. So when it came to actual dedicated study period, I didn't have one. I chose to go straight into 4th year, and I chose to just study as much as I could every day between my rotations and electives because I knew that I didn't do well with breaks. And this is how I chose to study for step 2, and I ended up doing really well and I have no complaints. But I do understand that other students may need a break, and this is totally up to you. So what I would personally recommend is if you're a USIMG and you have already been studying with UWorld, take a shorter break because you probably won't need 2 to 3 months of just studying full-blown and sitting at home and doing the same thing that you did for step 1. I really don't think it's necessary. You can easily study for 2 to 4 weeks for dedicated without any electives, and you'll definitely be able to cover everything that you needed to, and you'll be good for test day. Now, moving on to non-USIMGs. I know there's a lot of variation in the timeline for non-USIMGs, right? You either have your rotations or you have to find US clinical experience, and you're trying to get in as much studying as you can here and there. And whether you choose to take step 2 before your US clinical experience or after or during, I would recommend no more than 6 months of studying for step 2. And the reason I say this is because you're going to start forgetting this information. Right, we get to a point where we start feeling fatigued, we feel burnt out, and we're actually not paying attention to what we're learning and studying for the day. We're just kind of going through the motions, and at that point, your brain is losing its capacity. You're not going to be fully prepared for test day because you've been so exhausted going through the motions that when you sit there for those 9 hours, there's a very high chance that you've already lost a lot of the information that you had learned. So that's the number one reason why I say that try to stick to that 5 to 6 month timeline for dedicated study period, and I think this should be more than enough to get through and be able to score high as well if you've been studying properly using your resources. The very last thing I want to talk about is something that not a lot of people think about, but it's actually preparing for test day itself. So there's 2 parts to this. There's the day of the test, but even more crucial than that is the day before the test. There's a few things I want to talk about. The day before the test, the first thing I would recommend is actually waking up earlier, or at least waking up around the same time that you presume you'd be waking up for test day. And the reason I say this is because you want to make sure that you'll be able to fall asleep on time instead of just laying in bed and trying to get comfortable and de-stress, and if you don't end up falling asleep on time, you're not going to get enough sleep for the next day, and we all know that sleep plays a huge role. So definitely try doing that. I think it really helps. I didn't do it during step 1, but I did it during step 2, and I noticed a significant change. I felt more relaxed. I was able to wake up on time. I didn't feel groggy the next morning, so these are big things that can factor into how you perform during test day. The second thing is taking the day before the test to do something that you enjoy, right? Use this day to de-stress, right? Go to the gym, go work out, cook something or bake something, right? If you just want to sit on the couch and watch TV for a little bit to relax, that's totally fine, but I think doing something to help you relax is really important. I really don't recommend studying because this is going to make you panic if you come across things that you don't remember, and you're going to go into this crazy panic mode where you think that you need to keep studying in order to remember this information for tomorrow, but it's really not going to make a difference. You should instead focus on de-stressing and relaxing so that you're actually fully prepared and fully rested for test day. The next thing is making sure that you have all your items ready for test day. The number 1 is your test permit. Make sure you have this printed out. I know that having a digital copy in your phone is a lot easier, but just having that printed copy helps sometimes. And specifically, you need this because you need your CIN number. If you're anyone like me, I wrote down the wrong CIN number once, and I was panicking when I went into the computer because I wasn't able to log in. So definitely recommend having that highlighted so you know exactly what you need to write down, because you will need this number to log back into the computer after every single break you take. The second thing is making sure you have your snacks packed, your water ready to go, like your coffee. If you're a big coffee person like me, I would recommend maybe having like an iced coffee. The last thing would be to make sure you set your alarm There's definitely been times I've heard horror stories where somebody set an alarm, or they set it for the wrong time, or it never went off, or the volume was low and they didn't hear it. So definitely keep that ready to go. Talking about test day, it's always a good idea to locate the bathroom when you enter the Prometric site. You don't want to get out of your break time and realize that you don't know where the bathroom is, or it ends up being locked, or you end up getting lost, right? These are a few minutes here and there that you don't want to lose. You want to just be able to enjoy your break and relax and use it for whatever you need, instead of panicking and having your heart rate increase for no reason. So that's the first thing for test day that I did want to talk about. Second one is taking your breaks accordingly. This is something that you can practice when you do URL towards the end, right? If you were doing 6 to 7 blocks a day or something, you can definitely start practicing when you want to take those breaks. Personally, for me, I chose to take a break after each block, and although I'm somebody who likes to just go in and get my test done with and out of the way, I chose to take that break because I knew that it would be more beneficial for me. I was able to de-stress, I was able to take a bite out of my granola bar, take a sip of my coffee, use the bathroom. But more than that, I noticed that when I went back in for the second block, I felt more refreshed and more focused. And it made it a lot easier to go through those 40 questions instead of sitting there for 3 hours straight trying to do 120. So this really is up to you, but I would definitely recommend trying to practice it out when you're doing UWorld and NVMEs to see what better fits your style and preferences. The third thing that I want to talk about is how you dress. This is a long test. Wear something comfortable and make sure that you have a hoodie or a sweatshirt or something where you can delayer or layer up depending on what the temperature is like inside. Personally, for me, I like having a sweatshirt because I like being more comfortable, and the Prometric site is usually always cold every time I go in. If you're somebody who usually runs hotter, then make sure that you can delayer if you need to, but also layer back up so that you're not freezing. It sounds very silly, but these minor things can make a huge difference in how focused your mind is when you're going through those blocks. The very last thing is that you're finally done, right? You studied all these months, you took this 9-hour test. It's brutal, but you finally got through it, and you can finally relax and enjoy, right? It's tough not knowing whether you passed right away and what your score may be, but you deserve to go out and celebrate. You've been through so much studying, and it's definitely not an easy task. So don't go home and start going through those questions and trying to see which ones you got right or wrong. Just go home, sleep, nap, take a break, eat, go out with your friends and family, celebrate. You definitely deserve it. I hope that this video was able to help all of you and I was able to answer some questions. I definitely have more information on my blog if you're interested. And I know Match a Resident has great posts and great videos of other applicants and students and residents who have been through the same thing, and they talk about their resources and their study methods, so definitely check those out. But I just want to say thank you to all for listening and watching this, and I hope it was helpful.